I don't know if you can make a blanket case that it's worse to have a father who leaves or one that dies. Those are both pretty bad.
Sure.
There is less of a sense of perhaps the risk of feeling that it's your fault or that something could have been done about it, arguably. But putting that aside, like I think if you look at the data on the development of children, the evidence that children who have intact two-sex, two-parent families do better is overwhelming. Now, I don't think we know enough to specify the fact that it has to be two-sex, like a male and a female. I suspect that that's the case for a variety of complex reasons, but that doesn't mean that two people of the same sex couldn't make a good go of it. It also doesn't mean that single parents can't make a go of it. But on aggregate, it's better to have a mother and a father. And I think the reasons for that are self-evident, actually. It's like, well, because who are you going to model your masculinity from if you're a boy, and your femininity from if you're a girl? You'll get echoes of that in the same sex parent, but it's not enough for creatures that are as developmentally complex as us. And so it's kind of stunning to me that this is a discussion that we actually have to have. It's like, well, and especially when you also consider something we didn't talk about, relationship to the patriarchal structure of the nuclear family. It's like, I don't know how twisted you have to be to think that a man's commitment long term to monogamy and child raising over multiple decades is an expression of his desire for arbitrary patriarchal power. That's preposterous. It's exactly the opposite, obviously. So the fact that I can't believe that we're actually confused about this. Like, where is the selfish advantage precisely? The selfish advantage is manifested by psychopaths. They mate promiscuously, like mosquitoes, and their offspring live or die, and that's how it is, and there's a niche for that. And that's the arbitrary expression of power. So we're so demented about so many fundamental things that it just staggers me. We swallow things that aren't like incomplete theories. They're absolute preposterous falsehoods. And yet to oppose them means that there's something wrong with you ethically and politically. I just can't see how you can make a case that on aggregate, a family without a father and a mother is better than or equal to a family that has both. How can that possibly be true?
You don't have to make a case. You just have to say that the people who do make that case are bad people, which is what happens.
That's right.
Heather, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah. First, I'm just delighted. I've never heard a promiscuous mating system identified as being like mosquitoes before, Jordan, so that made me laugh. The one thing that I would add, and I basically agree with what you've said here, is that I think I don't see a reason to expect. I think that, I agree with what you said, that all else being equal, two parents is better than one, and two parents of opposite sex is going to provide more diverse input to the developing child. And therefore, if you have a loving relationship between two women or between two men who are raising children, then one thing in their favor is they had to really, really want those children, whereas many heterosexual parents end up parents without necessarily wanting kids, right? You can happen into parenthood being hetero, and you can't if you're homosexual. But I think it's more important if you're raising children as a homosexual couple of either sex to make sure that you have adults around of the sex that you are not, so that they are providing some kind of model for your children of what it is to be the other sex. And that's, this is not some sort of a bioessentialist imagining that like all men are like this and all women are like this, but that there are different ways of doing things, even down to on average women being more agreeable than men, and just seeing what that looks like in real time. Like the more exposure to the more diverse kinds of people you give your children, the more likely they are to be able to wade through life later on. And especially if if their natal home only has men or only has women, make sure you introduce them to some women or men.
I can give you an example of that. It's a bit offside, but not exactly. Girls with brothers are less likely to suffer sexual assault.
Right.
Why? Well, it's hard to say exactly, but it's partly because their exposure to men from an early age allows them to read the social situations more carefully, more accurately. It's something like that. I'm sure I'll get like lambasted for this, but that is a fact. So, and
Is it
you know,
also
we do
not
know there
about
are differences
they
between men
have
and
protection?
women. What's that?
Is it not also the fact that they're perceived as having protection
You know, it works
by other
later
men?
in life even. It's
Yeah.
a protracted effect. So, you know, that might be part of it to begin with, but it seems to
Yeah.
be longer lasting than that. I mean, it's
Right.
not
But
so
there's
preposterous
learning.
to claim that you're more likely to deal with people that you understand more deeply, deal, you know, effectively with people that you understand more deeply.
Right.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah, well,
You have an extraordinary statement.
I do think it's an indication of how confused we are by how much change is occurring, that all these things have become open to question. It might also be the case that, you know, that's a consequence of, well, a university education that isn't sufficiently cognizant of the debt that it owes to the past.
Yeah. No, and I guess actually picking up on something that you said earlier with regard to what's going on at universities, I think you know, you indicated that people who are concerned about their school boards could fill those spots because people are hungry. Like the political environment is hungry for people at that level, and I think this is part of what happened in higher ed, that no one who didn't have to went and pursued governance. You know, we're all expected, all us academics are expected to do a certain amount of governance, but if you were one of the scientists with big grants, you normally got an exemption. Or if you otherwise had a lot going on, that was how the university basically paid you. Like, you don't have to do the governance. So who was left in all the governance
People who
spots?
couldn't do the research.
The people who were otherwise uninterested or incapable of bringing new ideas to the university, and frankly, to some degree, who were driven to bring ideology in. And so, you know, we absolutely need people who are creative and analytical and logical and compassionate and actually know something and know how to communicate it and believe in the humanity of other people, to be in positions on school boards and in governance. And, you know, the work that doesn't feel like almost anyone's highest and best use, but that we need real good people in those positions.